We have one a congressional district race and the other a statewide race that we want to start with. And it is disappointing that both candidates in the two races are not here to really debate each other. And so, but because in both cases, one of the candidates for each race is here, we are going to go forward and allow that person a chance both to tell his or her story and also to respond to a couple of questions that you have written. So our first candidate is running for the congressional seat here in the 6th District of Alabama.
Well, I am retired Colonel Penny Bailey, and I am running for office. And you know, one of the questions I'm asked is, why? Why are you running for the congressional district? And I can sum it up very shortly: because I care. I care about our district. I care about the people of this district. And I care that our Constitution, that I have supported and defended my entire adult life, says representational government. And I do not believe that we're being represented. As a matter of fact, I'll go so far as to say I believe Congress is broken. I believe Congress is broken because, like I said, representational government is what we're supposed to have, but I do not believe that we have that, because I am so tired of DC coming down and telling us what we can and can't do, what we can and can't have. It's supposed to be us telling our representatives what we want, what we need for us to flourish at the local level, and that representative then going up to DC and speaking on our behalf. I don't believe that's happening anymore. Another reason I believe Congress is broken has to do with finances. You know, Congress has been part of this out-of-control spending for a number of years. And let me tell you, in the military, and my last budget was a $4 billion budget. And when I started out as a second lieutenant, I had a $1 million budget. Let me just tell you, as a second lieutenant, coming right out of college, given $1 million, I was more scared of that $1 million because I didn't know yet how to budget in the military than I was the $4 billion. But they taught us that that is not our money. They taught us that is the taxpayers' money. And every dime you spend, the taxpayer needs to benefit from that. And so with that mindset, we didn't even go on any leadership or any other kind of training classes without knowing that it needed to benefit the taxpayer. Well, you see, I don't believe Congress believes that. They think it's their money. And boy, are they spending it. They are spending money, and then when they don't have enough, they raise our national debt. And when that's not enough, then they raise it again, and they spend all that money, and they raise it again. And my opponent has been part of that out-of-control spending for 20 years. And he's voted to increase our national debt 7 times. So when I say I care that we're not being represented. I care that Congress is spending our hard-earned monies without any accountability to the taxpayer. And I want to see that change. I want to see that stop. And I will go and be your voice in DC.
We know that the 6th District is a relatively conservative district. How do you convince folks that you are, or would you attempt to convince folks that you are independent of the Democratic leadership in Washington should you be elected?
Right. Well, and like I said, our Constitution says representational government, and that means we the people. That doesn't mean a party. And I am not shy about telling people I don't think it's supposed to be about partisan politics. I think partisan politics is part of what's gotten us in trouble in DC. So it's not supposed to be about the red of Republicans or the blue of the Democrats. It's supposed to be about the red, the white, and the blue, us working together. And that's exactly what I'll do. If allowed to represent you in DC, I'm not going to care who is from what party. I'm going to work hard to make our country the best it can be, with the best decisions we can possibly make, making sure that your voices are heard. So I will not worry about what party anybody's with. I'll worry about what the issues are and what's best for our country.
Do you have 1, 2, or 3 priorities that you would try to really push hard on should you be elected?
Well, I've already touched on it, and that is money. A lot of waste in our government. And I will tell you, before, I think that we need to ask our citizens to tighten their belts, I think Congress needs to tighten their belts. And there's a number of examples, but one of them is the public servants. That's us, that represents you in D.C. We're not supposed to be a burden on the taxpayer for our entire lives. We're supposed to be public servants going up to do a service. But right now, if you serve only 5 years, you get a retirement for the rest of your life. Guess what? Funded by you, the taxpayer. Well, I just don't believe that's right. You know what? Wouldn't it be great if you guys only had to work 5 years and you got a retirement the rest of your life? We're not supposed to be a burden on the taxpayer. And I see that as a burden. And, you know, in addition to that, the people in Congress make more money than the majority of Americans. So they can fund their own retirement and they can fund their own medical care. So I'd like to see waste overall, and that's just one example, eliminated or at least worked on.
Depending on what side of the aisle you're on, the word Obamacare is a good word or a not so good word. Where are you on the Affordable Care Act, and what would you do if you were asked to repeal it?
And I have been asked that question, would you vote to repeal Obamacare? And, you know, the answer is, what would that look like? Because even the Republicans have come out and said, well, you know, actually, there's a lot of good things we like. And quite honestly, I have 2 kids in college, and I like that I can keep them on my health insurance. And of course, we all believe as Americans that pre-existing conditions should not limit somebody from being able to move on to another job and be able to afford to take care of themselves. So, you know, how can you answer a question about what would you do with the Repeal Act? Because I don't think they're going to repeal it totally. I don't know what it looks like. But I can tell you that I do care and that I will listen to the people of this district, and I will look at that bill closely and just see what happens. But I have to tell you, it's kind of funny because either president, I mean, Romney's the one that authored it initially, right? And then President Obama picked it up time again. So I really don't see it being repealed. I don't really think that's going to come up because I just don't see that happening, but I do thank you for the opportunity to be here and to address some issues.
Last question. As someone who is a veteran and has a husband in Afghanistan, we're facing this so-called financial cliff, where unless something is done, military as well as domestic spending will be cut across the board. How are we going to get through that if you're elected?
Well, it's simple. We're going to get through with it by people actually coming together and not being partisan and not being personal and not saying, well, you know, let's cut everybody else but me. Being in the military, I can tell you that, sure, there are things we can cut. It's what a lot of people don't know is that in the Department of Defense, which it has a huge part of that pie, but did you know within that pie in the Department of Defense, there is the education department gets money because our military kids go to public schools. So in that pie is the Department of Education. And in that pie is also the State Department because in the military we do a lot of humanitarian work and we also guard the embassies. And so when you look at that piece of pie where there's a large defense budget, you need to know that there's also pretty much every other department has a piece of that pie. So when they talk about cutting defense, all of those other pieces that go to the other departments are not going to be touched. It's now going to be looked at as the weapon systems and the personnel. But we can do it. We can still defend our country. We still spend 10 times the amount of our defense in our country than other countries do. So we can do it. We can still defend this country. And I want you to feel good about that. We all need to work together. And I've already had my time card put up again.
Well, we thank you. We thank you for your service and also for being willing to come out and share your story.